This week, we discuss email phishing attacks and defenses with Asaf Cidon, Barracuda advisor and assistant professor at Columbia University. In the security news, indistinguishable classifiers, screenshot the Etsy password file, what the Zimbra, couple of cool burp plugins, my voice is my passport, verify me. Software is harder to exploit unless it's firmware. When ChatGPT writes an article, becoming a trusted installer, not the last breach for LastPass, getting fried at the charger, and why hackers love stickers. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. FlexTrack is the premier pen test reporting and collaboration platform, empowering your team to spend more time hacking and less time reporting. FlexTrack centralizes your data, streamlines tedious workflows, automates report building, and facilitates communication with stakeholders. To learn how you can achieve a 30% increase in efficiency and cut report cycles by up to 65%, head to securityweekly.com/FlexTrack. Claim your free month of FlexTrack and get your copy of the Writing a Killer Penetration Test Report Guide today.
And welcome to the show. But first up, let me introduce you to a man who knows that 97% of the people are stupid, but he's just happy to be part of the other 5%, Mr. Paul Cidon.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode number 774, recorded in G-Unit Studios right here in Rhode Island on March 1st, 2023. To my left, Mr. Larry Pesce.
Howdy.
What's going on, man?
Oh, same stuff, different day.
Yes.
It's been a good couple weeks.
It's good to have you back here in the studio.
Yeah, we had a week off. That was good. I wasn't going to be here anyways because
that's right. Yeah, well, school vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, we're one of the only two schools in the state, school districts in the state that only have 2 days for winter vacation, as it were.
Oh, really? Because I'm petitioning to get rid of February vacation altogether.
Yeah, we have we have 2 days, Monday and Tuesday. Because Monday was President's Day. They have Tuesday, and that's it.
That's awesome.
Because we tend to get more snow, so they want those days to be able to make up snow days.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, man. No one listens to me, though. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
How's it going? Definitely enjoying my 6th winter. It is continuing here in Idaho.
That's wonderful. Lots of winter out there. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us.
Am I supposed to pay attention to you now, Paul?
What?
Hey, look where I went. Look where I went last week.
Ooh. You got Space Rogue's book. It's awesome.
I got the hard copy autographed edition.
Woohoo. Autographed and everything.
My paperback copy is sitting on my desk at home, and I flipped through it a little bit today. Looks good.
Nice.
I will. I was just going to say, Jeff, a little teaser, a spoiler kind of for our listeners. When we take a week off, I think in May, we run a throwback episode. And I found the throwback episode from 2015 where I interviewed four members of the Loft, including Space Rogue. So that will be...
I've heard you mention of this episode many times over the years, so I'm glad you finally found it. Oh, and I also got a cool Hacker News shirt.
Nice.
To give away.
That's awesome.
So I'm all set.
Glad
to be here.
You can still tell it's new. It's still got the nice crisp line down the middle.
That's right.
I literally just unfolded it. I'm saving it for the show.
Did not go unnoticed. Mr. Sam Bound is here with us. Sam, welcome.
Good evening. I must say I'm sort of horrified to see that book. You know, this practice of putting information on material objects is so last millennium.
I know, right? Actual printed book. Mr. Josh Morpett has joined us. Josh, welcome.
So sorry I'm late.
Okay.
I was just putting together a dollhouse and cursing repeatedly, so it loses track of time.
That's maybe not the first time I've heard that excuse. I'm not sure.
Yours was made out of latex.
Security Weekly listeners can save $100 on their RSA Conference 2023 full conference pass. The RSA Conference will take place April 24th through the 27th in San Francisco and on demand. Register using our discount code by visiting securityweekly.com/RSAC 2023 and use the code 53UCyber. I will not see you there, but maybe you'll see others there. I will be speaking at B-Sides Charm that following weekend, 29th and 30th. So I'll be visiting all of my Maryland peeps, I hope. Well, Jeff being one of them, of course. And I hope
we got to work that out, Paul.
Yes, we need to do some planning. Got a little time. It's good. Tonight's interview is sponsored by Barracuda. So go to securityweekly.com/Barracuda to learn more. And for the interview for this evening, we're joined by Asaf Cidon, an assistant professor at Columbia University and advisor to Barracuda. Barracuda has recently published its 2023 Email Security Trends Report, in which 75% of the organizations surveyed for the report had fallen victim to at least one successful email attack in the last 12 months, with those affected facing average costs of more than $1 million for their most expensive attack. In this segment, we're going to delve into phishing attack and defense. Asaf, welcome to Security Weekly.
Hey, glad to be here.
It's nice to have you. Asaf, how did you get your start in information security? Let's start there first.
Well, I guess so I'm originally Israeli, so my army service was my first foray. But then after that, I came to the U.S. to do my PhD, and then started a security company right out of my PhD called Sukasa, which did security for cloud storage. And then that company was acquired by Barracuda, where I ended up spending several years running the email security team. So that's kind of my journey.
Fantastic. I want to start with some observations first and kind of get your take on some of this, because when I looked at the topic for this segment, I was like, oh, it's kind of funny. I got like the lamest phishing attack email the other day, and I actually took a screenshot of it too. And I have it here somewhere because it was so lame. So it comes from Jeff Bezos. I was like, oh, how nice of Jeff to email me. That's just, an indicator. And then it says, hey, I'm Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon. I'm like, oh, I'm glad you said that, because I didn't know what Jeff Bezos was.
Glad you cleared that up.
It says, it's my intention to give away some of my wealth. And what was interesting was, now I didn't click the link or analyze it yet, but in the email, it linked to a CNBC article that was titled like Jeff Bezos plans to give away some of his wealth. So like, I'll give them some credit from that. Like, whether that link was legit or not, I kind of hope it was legit because it backs up their story. And I was like, well, that's not, that's kind of interesting. And then it says, hey, you can contact the agent, Mr. Robert, on how to proceed. And then there was a Gmail address. I was like, oh, that's like so believable. I can't wait to get my $1.2 million that was promised to me, because I was randomly selected. So
couldn't Jeff give you a little bit more than that?
Right? I know. Like, I'm Paul. I could use more, or I don't know, maybe less, maybe none at all. Just give it to charity. But obviously that was a really bad, there's a whole spectrum out there, Asaf.
So did you email Mr. Robert? I'm really curious to hear what happens if you do.
Now I really want to email Mr. Robert and just see how the ruse goes. I'm assuming that I'm going to have to pay some money to get that money, and when I pay that money, I will never hear from them again. That's the Nigerian scam, right?
Pig farming.
It's an investment.
Scam. It's the Chinese pig
Jeff
farm.
Bezos charity foundation. Yeah.
So
It's
hopefully,
the Chinese pig butchering. I think. I don't think it's the Nigerian scam. That's I think it's something called pig butchering. You have to pay to butcher the pig,
yes,
and you have to pay to get the meat.
You're correct.
But by the time
Josh,
you pay to get the meat, you didn't get anything.
it is the pig butchering attack, scam, fraud. So, but do we combat? Let's just take the easier example. How do we combat this, Asaf? Right? Do we educate our users? Do we use technology? And which has a better chance of sorting this all out for us when it's something that is clearly like kind of a ridiculous phishing attempt?
Well, this in the time in this time of layoffs, maybe this would be a good way to identify which employees are worth keeping and which are not. So maybe that's an upside. No, but more seriously, no. Well, I think that there was this theory also about the Nigerian prince scam, right? That because it's so ridiculous, like the goal is to find people that are actually susceptible to this type of thing, right? And then with those people, the people that actually would respond to this thing, right? Maybe you actually have a high conversion rate with them as an attacker because they're because nobody kind of that understands anything about like email or whatever, right?
Yeah. So this could be like what you're saying is this could be a fact finding mission, not necessarily the attack.
Right. So yeah, the economics behind some of these attacks is kind of sometimes counterintuitive, I think. But yeah, to your question, I think it's definitely a combination of both, right? You have to. So yeah, hopefully, at least these types of attacks your users would would be able to spot successfully. But yeah, no technology is perfect, and we do have to rely on humans exercising caution and good judgment, as well as having additional kind of human level controls, right? You don't want to wire money based on an email, or even maybe even set up some policies around some of these things, right? So it's a combination. It's never just technology, but technology should catch such an attack. I would wager.
Yeah.
Why do you think we're in 2023 and we have awareness now? Every employee knows what phishing is. We've done the due diligence where even my grandma understands that there are scams out there and they're very obvious, and she's skeptical of most things. Why do you think?
Why did you send your grandma scams, Tyler?
I got to test her. We test and verify, right? We got to keep her on her
Just checking.
I got to watch out for my inheritance here. I'm just kidding. But to be fair, we still are looking at phishing as one of the most prolific avenues for initial access and one of the most widely spread problems across all verticals and all business. Why is that still a thing when we've got advancements in technology, we've got email filtering, we've got AI, we have trained our users, we've got the awareness? There has to be some economic reason that this still works and that we have not seen a move to other things. I mean, we have combinations of things, but phishing is still the primary means of access for most of the actors. So why do you think that is?
No, and by the way, isn't that amazing, right? Like how many things like in technology remain this constant, right? If you think about it, it's like it is pretty incredible, right? That this threat hasn't gone away. Like I must say, so I'm currently a full-time kind of academic, and I still do kind of advising and research projects in this area, right? But like, so we submitted this paper on kind of the evolution of phishing, and we actually got this reviewer who was not from the area. It's like, I thought this problem was solved in the 90s. So
it's right up there with use after free.
So yeah, I mean that's a great. I think that's a great question. So I think fundamentally the reason is so I think like if you look at the evolution of email attacks, actually the crazy thing in my opinion is they've actually become less sophisticated over time. And what do I mean? They actually rely less and less on exploits and malware and having a lab somewhere with highly trained reverse engineers looking for vulnerabilities, right? And more they're reliant on very simple kind of psychological prompts and kind of social engineering, quote unquote, of like, hey, are you around? Sent supposedly the CEO to the CFO, can you get something done for me here quickly, right? And I think that the social engineering aspect is a lot trickier. It's a lot trickier to train against some of these attacks because they're attackers can't. It's not that hard to impersonate someone, and two, it's also harder to catch these types of attacks, right? Because like the exploits, right? The ransomwares of the world, they have to like communicate with some command and control center. They need to access some crypto library, stuff like that. Again, I'm not saying that problem is solved, but there's this very clear set of signals that you need to look for, right? Whereas if you're getting an email from like a newly created Gmail account, which, has all in all, like Gmail would have a pretty good, IP reputation, that just is like one line of text, is not that easy to solve technologically. So I think that's, and then the other thing I just must say is, like since we've all become, and I think this has become even worse, right, with COVID, since humanity is now so much more used to doing business online without, calling someone and without sitting to a desk near someone, and we're all, end up like buying services or paying someone online, and we're so used to that. I think that's another, pretty significant contributing factor to all of this.
So do you think some of that is that a fundamental flaw in the way that we have chosen to do business, and in order to solve this problem, we move to a system in which no one can contact you unless you are allowed to contact them, where there's a verification, almost as if you are doing a PGP signing party, and the people that can email you are the ones that you've met in person or that you're authorizing to do business with? Do we do that deny all kind of rule and implicit deny, and move business to a more feasible means of dealing with all this email, so that what's in our inbox is important and critical from a communication standpoint? And is that something that you think from today's day and age, can we get to that point where we actually have a high fidelity reliance on what is in our inbox and the need to answer and or read that?
Yeah, fortunately, my opinion on this is that this is a problem that's people have been trying to solve for decades, right? Like PGP, email encryption, email authentication. There have been so many protocols. I think it's not a problem that's ever going to be solved. Like fundamentally, email is not an authenticated messaging system, right? It's kind of like people are talking about Twitter today. Twitter suffers from the same problem, right? It was built from the ground up to never have authentication and user verification as part of the protocol, and it's very, very difficult to build these things in retroactively. And once everybody's using the system, it's very hard to get, it's kind of like this network effect, right? It's very hard to move everybody to a new system when you're dragged to using the old system. So I think, I unfortunately think, and especially, if you go talk to, if you go talk to organizations and you talk to parts of the org that, it's like engineers would be very happy, or security people would probably be very happy to have a allow lists and not let very a small percentage of people be able to communicate with them and distract with them, right? But when you go talk to salespeople, marketing people, or people that deal with suppliers and stuff, you're basically making their lives kind of impossible by introducing a lot of friction there, right? So yeah, I think I personally, this is a problem that's been, there's been so much work on it, and I think I think it's intractable. I think email is here to stay, and it's going to continue to be an insecure system, and we're going to just have to try to mitigate the costs of it as much as we can, but there's always going to be some cost of using it. That's my take on it.
Asaf, I have another example for you. And this one, I believe, is a missed opportunity by the attacker. Now, this particular attacker not even spoofed my email, spoofed my name, but the email was clearly not one of my email addresses, and sent it to accounts receivable at a company where I happen to be a consultant. And the email read, "I need you to email me our most up-to-date AR aging report with correspondent invoice number, due dates, and customer contact emails, respectively." And the email says, "Thank you, Paul Cidon," in my title and blah, 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 blah. Now, rightfully so, the accounting department was like, "Whoa, red flag," right? But I think the red flag maybe wasn't so much looking at the email address. That could have been it. I think it was what I was asking for. Had the attacker asked, "Hey, can I change and I don't give attackers ideas, but this is a well-known attack. Can I change my bank account for accounts payable so the next time you pay me, it goes here instead? I think that had a much better chance of going through than me asking for the entire list, of our customers.
And respectively.
Yeah, and respectively. I would never put that in an email.
Yeah, so I mean, I think so. This type of example that you're just describing is an attack where technology should I think good modern kind of ML based email systems should block, right? I think I've specifically on these types of attacks, like I've had a lot of like personal experience, right? Both when I was at Barracuda and also we actually wrote a paper on these types of attacks. If you're interested, it's online in 2019 about business. These attacks are called often business email compromise attacks. I'm guessing you all have heard the term, right? And so, like for example, in these types of attacks, you're exactly right. So there's several signals in these attacks that on their own are very noisy. So for example, the fact that they used your name but sent an email from an email that you've probably never used before, right? To your accounts receivable team. Or the fact that it's talking about this, you're demanding something, right? Or the fact that you're talking about this like sensitive, some financial matter, and maybe you usually don't ask for, maybe you don't send that many emails about it, right? So you can imagine each one of these individually would have a very like if you would set a static rule, like don't get emails right from Paul except for these email addresses. Maybe in your case, maybe you only use one email address or two or something, but
seven.
maybe not, or seven. Okay, yeah. So in your case, right, that would create a lot of false positives potentially. But yeah, you have all kinds of people with weird emails, situations, right? Aliases and stuff like that. And then also, even the content of the email, for your accounting team, it's very normal maybe to receive emails talking about payments, right? So, but again, so I think ML, right, this is where like ML can kind of create, you could think of it mentally as some kind of like auto generate some like very complicated if statements, right? Where basically would have a pretty high probability of stopping such an attack.
Are you saying a lot of the ML for email is complicated if statements?
I mean, a lot of ML in general. So I think
so. Those memes are correct, Asaf, is what you're saying. It's conditional.
No, right. No. Yeah, I mean, look, there's two types of kind of quote unquote ML these days, right? There's traditional ML, which is basically a very complicated if statement, and that's basically what works best often in cybersecurity, and I can explain why. And then there's AI, which
Asaf froze there. That's been
thank
happening.
God,
Oh, sorry, you froze there.
Sorry.
You froze there for a moment.
I froze. Oh, sorry about that. And then there's AI deep. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And there's AI, right? Deep neural networks, which today has very clear applications for natural language processing, computer vision, right? Which we're all reading about playing around with, recommendation systems, serving ads, stuff like that, but is not that useful in most other contexts. So yeah, actually, most AI/ML that most ML in security products is basically very complicated if statements that were not created by a human, but by an algorithm that is trying to optimize for precision and low false positives, right? So yeah, that's the question is like how to generate this, right? This set of rules and what types of signals do you collect so that it's effective. That's where the secret sauce is often rather than the actual algorithm. Anyways, I can rant about that topic for a long time if you guys are interested.
But I think it's always a combination, right? No matter how. I don't want to say simplistic your ML is, right? Because I don't want to say that if you're implementing machine learning, like it's sometimes it can be really simplistic, but there's a range. And so no matter how advanced your technology is using ML and or AI to protect your email and to basically filter good from bad in your email, you also need some kind of awareness component in training of your users, correct? It's always a combination.
No, absolutely. And, even the issue also that we have, right? And this is true in all of cyber, right? is that some attacks are kind of one-offs, right? And and often, again, the attacks that like companies and organizations really care about are often the ones that are very tailored and are going after high-profile people and are extracting these very large sums of money, not necessarily, the Jeff Bezos donation, right? So these types of attacks, by their nature, it's very hard to anticipate what you can't anticipate, and it's very hard. At the end, it's very hard to build models that will stop all of them, knowing in advance, trying to imagine anything an attacker might do, and training against anything an attacker might do, right? So yeah, by definition, you have to have security awareness training, and you have to have policies, and you also have to have other kind of auxiliary technologies, like what happens if let's say an email gets compromised, an email account gets compromised, and suddenly someone starts spewing thousands of emails internally and externally. What do you do? How do you detect that? How do you stop that? How do you shut that down? Right.
What if it's not a lot of emails, Asaf? What if we use the example that I provided earlier, and let's say they compromised my account and sent very targeted emails to people asking for things? Conceivably, you could train an ML model, and I mean, stop me if this don't stop me, but tell me if this exists, right? You could look at all of my emails because you got lots of emails from Paul. Then you look at the new emails at once my account's compromised, and they're written very differently. An ML model should be able to tell the difference. Is that an indicator? Is that included in products today?
Yeah. So Barracuda does some of that. Yeah. For example, so account takeover is one of the. This is exactly kind of the scenario you're describing. This is actually one of the most challenging scenarios, exactly because the email is actually coming from your account. It's not coming from Paul, I love squirrels at gmail.com, right? It's coming from your actual email address, within the network, right? And actually, most email security products don't even observe internal traffic because.
Paul, how do you know about squirrel fetish?
Sorry.
Sorry, you froze there again. You're back.
You froze for a second, so I took advantage to comment on how you knew about Paul's squirrel fetish. You never
squirrel.
know.
What squirrel? Where? Oh, what were we talking about? Yeah. Sorry. Continue, Asaf.
Your alter ego, apparently. So yeah, these attacks are basically kind of the most trickiest to stop. For example, stuff that we look at is changing patterns in the email itself, the content, but also IP, trying to catch it when the attacker logs into your account. There's also people change often attackers have to change various rules in Outlook or something, so maybe they want to route all the emails out of the org. So those are also things we look at. Yeah, so basically any signal that you can imagine in these situations we try to use because it's kind of it's a very tricky situation. Also, it's very tricky because false, these attacks are very rare, and you don't want to start blocking internal emails willy-nilly, right? Because then people will get really pissed at your product, right? So this is why machine learning for security is tough, because the what you're trying to catch is very rare.
But couldn't an attacker
very difficult?
An attacker could do this too. If an attacker gained access to my email account, the attacker could take my email archive, run that through a machine learning algorithm, and be able to create emails as Paul. And that would probably be pretty successful, I would imagine.
Which they have done, by the way.
I was going to say, that's happened, I believe in, Asaf, you said in voice, but also in email too, Tyler, so you're saying?
Yeah. This was the research done by the old Silent Break crew, my cousin and Will Muhax. They did the research, I believe, against Proofpoint, where they were able to enumerate out the machine learning model and what it was flagging, looking for, and then be able to, with a high fidelity, build phishing emails that bypass the filter and scored very high from a probability of likely email from that target based on what was in the model, if I remember right. Very, very interesting.
They enumerated the if statements.
Years ago.
Yeah, no, and look, I mean, so again, going back to the example we talked about, with your account receivables example. So you can imagine, like I mentioned, that one signal that you would definitely want to use if you're training a ML model here is how many times, let's say, did I see an email coming from this weird email address, right? So if it's the first time I'm seeing an email with the name Paul from this email address, that's probably more suspicious, right? But yeah, that's true. Like one way to bypass this is to start sending a bunch of like innocent emails, right? And right, to build up your reputation. So yeah, I mean, all these models, it's impossible to create like fully robust models in this world, right? So that, yeah, you have to have, this like layered defense in depth thing that everybody likes talking about. It's not just a buzzword. It is true, right? You have to have that. You can't just rely on automated detection.
What do we consider today as an advanced email protection strategy for defense in depth? Are we looking at things like sandboxing, account takeover protection, conditional access rules, the ability to drop attachments in sandboxes and detonate them and look for IOCs? Like, what is the level of necessity for a company of any size to operate inside of the realm of email and do that with a good defense in depth strategy?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few baseline things that, frankly, pretty much everybody does. Like, so actually, the sandboxing, kind of malware detection, running it through both dynamic and static checks. That's actually become something everybody does. I mean, even your free Gmail and Outlook account would do that for you, right? So that stuff is super baseline. The more advanced stuff that companies usually are going to pay money for is like BEC protection. That's right, like protecting against someone impersonating your employees, emailing somebody else in the company. The even more advanced ones are like somebody impersonating a supplier, emailing someone in your company. And then account takeover, that would be another one where there's a lot of efforts, and that would be kind of definitely, I think, it is becoming like critical, and not kind of a baseline capability. Then other things would be like what I was mentioning, like the ability to also post, like so like a lot of these email administrators are chasing after these account takeover events and like remediating them and trying to because like once they're into one account, they spread it to other ones, and they're trying to, it's kind of whack-a-mole game. So tools that let you basically kind of do forensics for kind of your email, and then let you kind of figure out where the attackers might be sitting, and then kind of disabling them. So those are all very, very valuable. Then the security awareness training that we talked about, and then I'd say another piece of this is like backup and archive, right? What happened, like in the case of ransomware, or if someone starts polluting, starts deleting emails, you want to another kind of, let's say, Office 365 data or Gmail data, you want to be able to recover from that. So those are. Yeah, and finally, MFA is also a piece of this, right? Because again, for account takeover, so rolling out MFA for email can be a bit tricky, but that's another piece. Oh, sorry, yeah. And one more thing to mention. I mean, despite the fact that I mentioned that email authentication is kind of this still kind of somewhat broken thing, there are steps you can take to, let's say, shore up to a degree your email authentication, like with technology, with like DMARC, SPF, and DKIM. Again, that's not gonna protect you to some degree.
I was going to ask with SPF, DKIM, DMARC, I think kind of table stakes capabilities that email protections today have of, is it a new domain, is it a new email? That makes it harder for someone to pull off a phishing attack than when we didn't have those things. Yet it's still a prevalent attack. Have attackers just figured it out, or have they just gotten really good at like compromising already existing infrastructure to get around a lot of these kind of trust-based indicators? So
the thing is, like DMARC, SPF, and DKIM, they're actually like not. They don't really help you in most of these scenarios, right? So what they really help you is like they help you like make, let's say, securityweekly.com or something, right? So this can prevent me from sending people email, actually spoofing securityweekly.com. Like, so that's what, like, if you set up like a DMARC on securityweekly.com, that's what it would give you. But it's not actually going to help you. Like, if I'm an attacker and I set up like a Gmail account and I email you from there, it's not going to help you, right? You're not going to block Gmail emails, right? Or if I compromise, if I compromise securityweekly.com email account and use that to send internally or externally, like, that's not going to get blocked by anybody, right? So that's those types. That's where a lot of the phishing is coming from, right? From these compromised domains and from legitimate domains, basically. That,
right. And if you're not skilled enough to compromise an account, you can just go buy it online, basically.
Right. I mean, yeah. And you could always, and you could just set up, you could set up a domain, sit on it for long enough time, and then start sending emails from it. Yeah.
Well, what about hardware-based two-factor authentication? Google said that totally solved phishing. So,
I mean, look, if you deploy multi-factor authentication comprehensively, it helps you, right? So it really does help you mitigate this account takeover problem that we talked about, right? So it won't, and it will also make sure that, like, if someone steals like your kind of corporate email password, right, for some other system, right, like some SaaS kind of based system, then that so that's definitely key, but it won't solve someone impersonating your CEO with a Gmail account or whatever, right, or an Outlook account, or it won't solve someone compromising your supplier and emailing you as the supplier requesting a payment to a different bank account. So it's definitely helpful, but it's not an end-all solution. And at least when I was at Barracuda, we used to work with a lot of organizations where, like, deploying MFAs basically would be very, very difficult for them, right? Like, if you have a truly kind of mobile workforce, or like a lot of consultants or part-time employee, like we used to work with a lot of like real estate brokerage firms, for just pulling one example, right? Like, it's very hard if you're an IT of a large real estate firm to get all your real estate brokers to, like, get MFA on their phones, right? That's, like, it's also like people have their own phones, right? So yeah, a company like Google or like the big banks can probably pull off kind of comprehensive MFA, and maybe some other like kind of.
But I feel like suppliers. I feel like comprehensive, you also mean properly configured, that it doesn't fall back to a text message, and it's a good form of a multi-factor. It's a hardware token or a generator app, a passcode generator app, something like that.
But what does that imply? It probably implies that it's probably a company that is already managing all the devices of their employees, which, again, there are such companies, but I don't think that's the majority of organizations. Right. So Google can do that, and some of the other, major tech firms can do that, and again, banks. But for the vast majority of organizations, it's between totally unfeasible to impossible. Right. That's why MFA adoption is I feel, I'm not an expert on this topic, but I feel has gotten stuck at some level, and I think that's probably the reason, because in many environments, and as you were saying, right. And even the MFA that has been adopted, some of it is like just SMS MFA. Again, better than nothing, but that can also be, these SMS passcodes can easily be phished as well, as we all know. So
that's kind of where MFA, like, we had this pie in the sky idea that we were going to get to this destination of security with MFA. MFA was going to fix the world and solve things, and people started implementing it, paying a lot of money, and yet the attackers still find ways to bypass it. You can, do SIM swapping because PII data is leaked all over the place, or they compromise Active Directory on-prem and change the phone number for validation for MFA. Now they've got access to your Azure AD Online cloud access, or there's a million ways with questions and self-service resets that allow you to get past this MFA, or even unregistered devices, or not being tied to a specific device. where that is compromised. iCloud being a great example of that. All those things have kind of made this big investment that we tried to push onto people seem very ineffective for the cost and the headache that we've pushed users to. Now, I see things like the FIDO2 Alliance, and where we've looked at adopting this passwordless, moving away from passwords and having things that allow us to do MFA without the overhead of SMS tokens, all the things that we're failing at. I see that as a path forward, yet there's so much I would say, insecurity around unknown technologies, which have been around a long time, just because people have not taken the time to learn them. So I think this is an adoption by the practitioners to get to a place of understanding, as well as looking at the technology from something other than just a single solution, magic button, let's solve this with one single thing. We have to really get to that point where we're always going to have to change and always adopt and always look for new innovations to make security work.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm also, by the way, more bullish on the passwordless authentication stuff. But yeah, I think that I mean it's like an ROI game, right? You're kind of like trying to reduce the ROI of your adversary, and you're never gonna, it's never, determine enough adversary. It's very hard to, a determined enough adversary with infinite resources basically will always be able to break into a system, right? I think we've seen that a lot with the nation state hacking, right, going on with some incredible types of attacks, right? So, but I think it's kind of just, it's exactly what you're saying. It's an investment in reducing the probability of attacks and reducing the magnitude, but it's never going to be foolproof. None of these technologies is ever going to be foolproof.
Yeah, someone was describing me today as affecting the economics of the attacker. And
right.
I feel like we've done that with email phishing. Maybe not. I mean, the fact that it's still prevalent, it still kind of actually baffles me. I would have thought with as much attention and spend we have on email phishing, I mean, in a lot of cases, rightfully so, why haven't they, I mean, maybe they have moved a lot of it to SMS phishing and other forms of communication. I think we have seen an uptick in that as well, to go, well, I'm not going to combat all this. It's harder and harder, I think, every year to slip something past the email phishing defenses. So let's just go to SMS or some other kind of communications platform. You seeing that trend? You think that'll continue, Asaf?
I think what happened with email is, so spam, I really do, spam, we still get some spam occasionally, but it's not, I think there were days where that was, a pretty big problem. And, even in our report, there are going to be companies that will always complain about it, but I think that those, so we've gotten a whole kind of around that problem reasonably well, I feel. I think what happened with email is that there's like two vectors in particular. So one of them, that just attackers have, became very, very lucrative, probably in the last decade or so, even a little bit less than that, right? Probably in the last like 5 to 8 years. So one of them is the BC.
Mm-hmm.
There's because it's like it's like I'm sending an email impersonating someone without any malware or anything, and I just can extract money to like some random bank account, which is like amazing, right? From an ROI perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that what really enabled, that type of that attack kind of caught a lot of the email, the security vendors off guard, and it's still a big problem. I think what enabled that really is, again, this move to, because like our kind of a sociological kind of move to using the internet for payments, and not, again, this move online kind of enabled that. And also the fact that it's so easy now to figure out who the CFO of the company is and read about them on LinkedIn, right? So all this stuff kind of really enabled that. And then the other one is ransomware, where I think the key enabler there, to be honest, is cryptocurrencies, which basically allowed attackers to actually get the money out in ransom, which without cryptocurrencies would be basically impossible, or you wouldn't be able to pay the attack. Your no legal department, let's say your U.S. company, would let you like send a ransom over wire transfer to Russia, right? Like, I think, right? But somehow, I think with somehow with cryptocurrencies, it's still some kind of a gray area where you don't exactly know where they are, and right? So, and so the ransoms get paid out, right? So I think those two trends, more than anything, have resuscitated this problem a lot. Yeah, and I guess also the other thing is also regular phishing. Just the value here of getting someone's credentials again, because we're doing everything online. Now, like 10 years ago, I don't even know if you could, like, if I stole your bank's username and password, I'm not even sure they would let you transfer money, right? Like it's much more value. Like your credentials now are much more valuable also than they used to be, right? That's part of it. So I think a lot of these trends are like, they're not related to email actually, but like I think they made the ROI much better from the attacker. Basically, the payoffs. I think there was a study like in the heydays of spam that the entire spam economy was like $100 million a year. There was this study from UC San Diego that they kind of characterized because they were able to kind of map out like which banks actually serve spammers and kind of figured out that number. The current let's say BC, which is something the like FBI, it's an attack that the FBI tracks, right? I think the estimates, I think it's like something like, I don't remember the latest numbers. It's multi-billion dollars a year, right? So I think the ROI, the R on the ROI has gotten a lot higher for attackers than it used to be. So that's why we're seeing these attacks.
I think, again, one of the other things that we don't consider from a monetary value, like, again, removing how attackers make money. The spamming is a means to an end, right? It allows initial access. It allows someone to click and buy something. It allows the clickbait, the advertising, the infection, whatever that route is. But we really come back to the source of that, the credentials or the identity or the access that is being provided. All of those things, if we remove identity as a password and you're only allowed to access it because you have a specific device that's tied to you in a geographic location that's got conditional access on a specific machine, that narrows the attack window for the attacker. If we remove things like PII and the value on a social security number, which shouldn't be an identity, and most of them are leaked, or phone numbers, all of this stuff becomes public. Now you do not have a monetary source for attackers to leverage, and therefore you've crippled their economy. So now what do they have to go after? Really, they have to go after data, and by removing those other two, you've minimized that attack window and taken that threat vector on all verticals down to a substantial number that can be managed. And again, this is a societal thing that we have to look at and get past from just a username and password or fixing an email. This is a big picture problem that I don't think anybody's trying to tackle at a large scale.
No doubt. I think if like identity / authentication was solved, a lot of these, not all, but it would make the problem a lot, it would really improve our situation. But again, identity is it's a tough, it's a tough. I think I do think there has been progress on it. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of like it's a very tough problem to solve. There are network effects with existing, like, again, email protocol, like existing unauthenticated protocols. Moving to password lists will help, but I think I don't think it's ever, I kind of don't see everybody, I don't think it's going to be feasible to move everything to passwordless, right? So I think, it's, I don't think these problems are going away. That's my personal, and I don't think it's like, it's not something that one company will ever be able to solve, in my opinion, right? These are network effects. It's very hard to get people to stop using emails, or moving off of SSNs or something, right? It's seems. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's a massive undertaking, right?
I think Jeff.
Yeah, shifting gears a little bit, but I'm interested in your thoughts. I actually have a client right now who his policy is to use Slack for all corporate communications, and everything I've been doing with them has been over Slack. So they granted me access to some level on their Slack channel. Do you foresee similar types of email-based attacks, but now Slack-based attacks or social media-based attacks, especially the ones that are trying to get you to click on a link, or I don't know how many of the 13. I was reading your article earlier, or Barracuda's article about the 13 different types of attacks that happen on email. What are your thoughts on, I guess, loosely social media platforms, if that's the right term? I guess it's not the right term. Things like Slack, alternative channels.
There have been attacks on these types of platforms like Slack and Teams, and other Skype. I think. So first of all, like Slack in that sense is quote unquote better than email because it's more authenticated, right? Again, because it's often tied to a corporate identity. But again, Slack can never replace email. I don't think it's going to replace email because, again, if you ever talk to a salesperson or a real estate broker or someone who deals with a lot of external organizations, they're not able to use Slack for those types of communications. But we've seen some attacks on that. Like that's actually an area that we have been monitoring pretty closely for many years. It's not a lot, I think. Now the question is why. I think probably again because these are like economic businesses. I think they, they have a good business model maybe with email, so they, and with text, phishing and stuff like that, right? So I'm not sure. I think they don't have sufficient pressure yet on these platforms to move away or to invest in new platforms. So that would be my guess. So I mean, yes, there are attacks, but is it like it pales, completely pales in comparison to something like email, for example? Like talk about like 1,000x less likely, right? Just like when you look at the data.
I would say don't count out Slack as being the next major vector if we've not already been using it. Good attackers have been doing this for 4 or 5 years, right? Like being able to inject yourself into a business because they allow guest access and registered names aren't tied to emails. So you can impersonate someone, have a name of someone not registered. You can actually, I'd say 90% of companies that do Slack don't set up the private rooms correctly. You can do a search across the entire Slack database and get all the history for any of the rooms if they're not private and view the conversations without having to join any of the channels. So there's major security issues from, even API, the ability to dump Slack and Slack history once you've gained a appropriate level token causes some big problems for major companies that they don't think about. Then you start to talk about legal issues of like e-discovery and the ability for searches and history with inside of companies and the liability of what happens in those channels. You think about some of the Slack rooms or Discord that you deal with. There's a lot of institutional knowledge, links being shared, links that authenticate to things like GitHub, screenshots of passwords, help desk tickets are even tied to Jira through that, and you're able to leverage those in order to jump different SaaS providers. So yes, attackers are doing this, but this is a much more sophisticated attack. However, it's not a harder attack. This isn't something that is more difficult to do. It's just not used as often. And I think we'll see that big jump very, very soon as email becomes a less viable target. It's much easier to get the information out of something like Slack, or you look at Discord. That's being used in crypto channels for many of the exchanges. That's how a lot of the wallet compromises have happened, is people take over a Discord chatbot and then impersonate a support person and move to a DM and take a wallet. So all of these things are going on.
You mean Robux as well?
That too.
Mm-hmm.
Bastards.
Yep. I think what I'm hearing though is it's very use case specific, right? Asaf, you described the economics of email phishing, right? And how attackers are still going to use that, and then you transition to maybe some crypto attacks. They're going to use Discord. Some attackers in certain groups are going to use Slack, and all of these attack vectors are at their disposal depending on their goals. Is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's very. This whole field, I mean, is very driven by the attacks that happen. Slack has always been highly vulnerable to attacks. Slack is not new. Discord is not new. I'm less familiar with like the, cryptocurrency, like attacks on wallets on Discord, but from like IT, in IT environments, I don't think that they're seeing too much. Like at least the types of customers that I speak to, I don't think that Slack is yet becoming a major vector for attack, but there's definitely potential there, as you guys are saying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I hear is it's kind of a concept of the low hanging fruit. The bad guys are going to do what's the easiest and most lucrative. That's the economic aspect from their perspective, and that doesn't inherently mean that Slack or any other technology is inherently more secure because bad guys aren't going after it as much. It's just because there's more fruitful avenues,
right.
And they haven't gotten around to. I mean, 20, 25 years ago, Apple was supposed to be so secure, and all the problems with Windows, but Windows, was 99% of the market back then. So obviously everybody was paying attention to Windows.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think, but also, when you look at some of the organizations that do these types of attacks, right? It's actually, it's not like we suspect there's not like an enormous set of organizations. There's probably clusters and that launch a very large number of attacks, but it's probably clustered in not such a large number of groups of criminal groups, and they have their own culture. They copy each other, right? So there are many vulnerabilities out there, many communication systems you could target. Specifically, why they choose one over the other, exactly what you're saying. It's not necessarily because one is not, they could, we could easily launch attacks. I'm sure all of us here could think of like many ways to attack Slack, Teams, right? All of these, many of these platforms. It's actually not rocket
what's the
science,
type of
right?
platform? What's the type of platform that's going to come next?
For attack?
No, for communication. Slack is bad.
Well,
Discord is bad. Email is bad. Everything is bad.
Josh, the metaverse is here. Metaverse has been.
I'm going to
here.
hit you. I'm going to hit you so hard that you're going to spin your ass into the metaverse.
But Tyler, we're gonna protect the metaverse with blockchain, so it's gonna be good.
And AIML.
We are. You're doing it, buddy.
And if I knew the next communication platform, I wouldn't be talking to you.
Right?
It's a good point.
I wouldn't tell you also. No offense.
Speaking of the next platform, really quick, ChatGPT. I think there were some that were like, well, attackers can now use ChatGPT and they can create awesome phishing emails. But I mean, my take on that, Asaf, is that attackers have always had tools at their disposal to write better phishing emails, but they don't, because largely they don't have to accomplish their goals. Is that your opinion as well?
I mean, some do. Some will like write the email and actually figure out your signature and format and the company header and all this stuff. So some go to greater lengths, especially when they're targeting more organization, larger companies with a bigger payoff. I think that ChatGPT is quite dangerous in this world. It's not enabling you to do anything it could do before. It's lowering the cost even further. That's what I'm concerned about. It's making it even like. So what do you need right now to launch a BDC attack? You need like a semi-literate person who can like look up LinkedIn, Facebook, company's website, read some articles and send an email with reasonable English, right? Those are the job requirements. So maybe they need to spend 15 minutes on each email. Maybe that's too much. Okay. So I think with ChatGPT, you'll just be able to do automate this thing at a massive scale. That's to me the danger, basically. So it's not that you couldn't do it before and that it's not being done. It's just that, you can ramp up the volume a lot more. That's what I'm concerned about.
I'd also argue because it's a natural language model, the emails will come across as being much better and much more literate than some of the stuff that we've seen in the past.
Right. No. It should up the game. I agree. The average phishing email could get a lot better. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
More questions?
5 questions?
Any questions before 5 questions?
Do the 5.
Asaf, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Born ready.
Awesome.
3 words to describe yourself.
Bald. I love talking too much, as you've noticed. I guess that's already too many words.
Verbose? I think the word you're looking for is verbose.
We're good.
Verbose. That's a good word. Let's see.
Was that 3? It was more than 3.
Close enough.
We'll call it.
Let's call it 3.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Sorry?
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Whew. Let's see. Difficult one. I think probably remote detonation. I think out of sight, out of mind.
Wow.
Right?
Nasty.
Also, if you would write a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Bald, verbose, into email security.
Who
wouldn't want to read that book?
Right. What is your favorite hacker movie?
There's that one. I forget. Yeah, it's a very famous one.
Hackers?
Yeah, hackers.
Sneakers?
Sneakers are. This should just be a multiple choice. Is it sneakers or is it hackers?
I'm gonna.
Or war games.
Yeah,
War
hackers.
games.
Hackers.
It's hackers. It's hackers.
Yeah.
It's hackers.
What is your favorite hacker movie and why is it War Games?
Right? No, it's hackers. Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Okay. My favorite celebrity of all times by far is Larry David. And he would be my single parent because he's my hero.
Fantastic. Asaf, thank you very much for appearing on this edition of Security Weekly.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was a pleasure. Hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. Folks can learn more at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Stay tuned. The security news coming up next.